So I am really pleased that Dania Cabello is here with us today. I met Dania several years ago now. As you'll see, those of you that are going to attend the 2 o'clock showing of Footballistas for Life, she was an instrumental part of that amazing documentary and an amazing program going on that went on at Oak Academy in Oakland. And that's how we first met. And we kind of ran into each other serendipitously a couple of months ago in a cafe. And Dr. Beal and I was having breakfast with Dr. Beal, like, you got to come to our classes. Because what Dania's been doing for the past several years, and really probably over the course of her entire life, is really looking at sport from a way that not many people do. It's really about sort of sport and the liberatory practices, like the freedom that can come from movement. And we don't often talk about sport that way. And as you can see in this class, we don't normally talk about bodies in that way. So I am absolutely delighted that she's joining us today. So please join me in welcoming Dania.
Well, thank you and good morning. I do want to give a super special shout out to Rita, because there's sometimes I think that we don't always realize just the access or the privileges that we have. I know that when I was younger, I was a student, I was working, I was playing soccer, and one of the things that I want to just give a public appreciation to is that because of this center and because of Rita and the work that your professor has done, I have been not only given a platform to kind of justify and that recognizes my profession and the work that I've done, but also through this center and this university that you are so fortunate to get to be a student of, I have met some of my lifelong idols, from Dave Zirin, who's a sports writer, to Wyoming Attias, to John Carlos. Thanks to the center, I've literally met the people that I grew up idolizing and wanting to be like, and who inspired and informed so much of my work. So to be now presenting in this space is a huge honor for me. And also to be in your presence, because without you, I would just be talking to a wall. So thank you for being here. I'm gonna just give a brief background on myself and who I am and what I'm doing up here. So let's start in Oakland, where I was born and raised in 1983. I grew up to a family of political refugees from Chile. My parents came in the 70s fleeing a military coup that was very much largely backed and supported by the United States government. A lot of our family members were tortured, murdered, disappeared, and my parents, like thousands of other Chilenos, had to flee the country. And ironically, we landed in the very country that was helping kind of sustain the military coup in the country of our homeland. And I grew up in that family, in that context, in Oakland, and also playing sports. So sports has been it was my first love language, my first love affair, and I've had like a very complicated relationship to sport. And that's kind of what has brought me here today, through a personal journey of being an athlete, a mover, someone who loves to play, but then also through my life and kind of later in adulthood, trying to figure out ways to make it meaningful. Sometimes we're told that sports and play is just this extra fun leisure thing that only privileged people do. And I was trying to make meaning of that. And one of the ways in which I did that was through education, was deeply kind of exploring the intersection of sports and education, to the point where if you had asked me when I was 20 what I was going to be when I was older, I never would have imagined that I would be in a position that I am now, teaching at St. Mary's College. I teach PE teachers who are getting their masters on liberatory pedagogy for sports. What does that mean? Can anyone take a guess? What does liberatory pedagogy for sports mean to you? Anybody? Just take a wild guess. I won't judge you too hard.
To get out of their comfort zone, do something different.
Totally. To get out of our comfort zones, to do something different, to use sports as a place to talk about freedom. And that's really what has brought me here today. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of journey. But before we do that, I just want to know by a show of hands, because I don't know this class and you don't know me, I just want to know who here is a morning person. Raise your hand if you're a morning person. Okay. Raise your hand if you are like me and you're kind of like come alive later in the day at night. Okay, so it's a little bit leaning towards the afternoon crew. So one of the things that I see in schools is that the first thing that happens is that we completely neglect our bodies, right? We ask kindergartners to stay seated in your seats for 6 hours a day and to try to retain information. And honestly, I'm 36 years old. I cannot sit for 2 hours, 1 hour comfortably. So I'm going to invite you, if you can, to join me real quick. And everybody stand up. We're going to do a little body awakening because we're going to be engaging our minds today, and we cannot engage our minds without acknowledging and engaging our bodies. And so all I'm going to do is invite you. This is a tapping technique that helps send blood to different areas of your body. So go ahead and tap your forearms. You're just waking it up and pay attention. You probably didn't even think about your forearms this morning. Move up your arms towards your upper shoulders, up here. Say what's up to kind of one of these areas where we hold a lot of stress in our shoulder, neck area. If you can, if you're not too tight to get up to your shoulders. Hit your belly. Say hi to your belly. I hope you've had breakfast. I hope you're not on a strictly coffee diet like me in the mornings. Your back. I'm sure the microphone crew loves that I'm tapping on my microphone. Your thighs, quads, and then work your own way all around your legs and your shins. And come up. All right, so I'm going to invite you into these 3 breaths, okay? It goes like this. This is a good little technique for when you got to do something but you're a little low on energy. You're going to breathe in through your nose twice, like this. 3, and out. In, and out. So again, we'll go. One more time. Shake it out. All right, and take a seat. Thank you. Thank you for engaging with me, paying attention a little bit to our bodies. So today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the labor of play and its impact on the body. So I looked at your syllabus for this class, and I'm super nerdy. I got really excited. Like, man, I wish that I had had this course when I was an undergrad. I wish I had a professor that was inviting me to read and think about sports in this way. I didn't, but thankfully we have professors like Rita Liberti who does. And so today's presentation, I wanted to give you this, there's an author named James Baldwin who has deeply, deeply, deeply impacted my life. Raise your hand if you know who Jimmy Baldwin is. If you've ever heard of James Baldwin. Okay, so if you haven't, I feel really honored to share with you. James Baldwin is one of the most, in my opinion, important writers of our time. He's deceased. He's a Black, queer author who writes a lot about the Black experience in the United States. And as a little girl growing up in Oakland, it was actually mostly a lot of Black authors, Black athletes, Black organizers that informed my politics and my experience. And James Baldwin was one of them. And he has this quote, and I've adapted it. He highly criticizes the United States. And his quote says, where I put sports, it actually says America. But I say, I love sports more than anything in this world. And for this reason, I insist on my right to criticize it perpetually. So what does that mean to me? What does that mean to you, actually? Before I tell you what it means, what does that mean to you? Because I love it, I insist on my right to criticize it. How do you understand that?
you love something doesn't mean you can't criticize it to make it better?
Absolutely. That's it. It's actually the idea that because you love something, it's your right to criticize it in order to, what's your name again? Jacob, in order to make it better, just as you stated. So for me, this is kind of my place of engaging with sports. It's like, I love you so much, I'm gonna critique the hell out of you because I wanna make you better. I wanna make you safer. I wanna make you more interesting. So before I get into this, I'm gonna have you do a little activity amongst yourselves. I know that talking in front of me, you don't know me, maybe a little bit quieter or shy, but I want you to turn to the people at your table and maybe partner share or share in three if you only have, if you have odd numbers. And I want you to answer this question to each other. Think back to your childhood. So take a moment, follow me here. Think back to your childhood and recall a game, any game, it doesn't have to be sports, any game that you love to play. It could be with yourself, a game you did in your head, a game you did with your cousins, anything. Think about that game. Think about what you loved about it. Think about it in detail. Who was with you? Now, second layer, I want you to think about, okay, now that you're a little bit more grown and removed from that time in your life, what do you think that game reveals about you? So I'll kick you off and share mine. When I was little, I used to play a game called Dark Room with my cousins. It was like family parties, the adults were doing their thing, cooking, playing music. All the cousins would get in one room of the house, we would turn off the lights, we would blindfold one of us, and then we would move around the room like as sneaky and quiet, like channeling our inner ninja to not get caught. I'm not talking about jumping on desks over computers, trying not to get hit. We would play this for hours in a dark room. And when I look back on it, I realize one of the things that it reveals about me is that I actually, there's a little bit of sneaky in me. I like being a little sneaky, and I kind of like bending the rules. And there was something about that game where it was okay to bend the rules a little bit, it wasn't causing harm. And I see as an adult, I'm always looking at how can I bend the rules that I find to be oppressive. So that's, I kind of gave you a little insight into me. I want you to turn right now to someone at your table, share what was this game that you played as a child, and what does that reveal about you when you think about it? Okay, go ahead, I'll give you about 2 minutes to share, so 1 minute each. Go ahead.
It's like a lot of like
Take about another minute to wrap up. I like the laughter. Oh, you did too? That's great. Do you still play it?
One ball or?
All right. I love hearing you talking. I love the murmurs and the laughter. So we'll bring it back. That was amazing. Thank you for engaging with that activity. I want to know, can someone kind of just share? Somebody who has a story, a game that they recalled, and yeah. And remind me your name.
Mia.
Mia.
I used to play tennis for like 13 plus years of my life, and I know that it brought out a lot of patience in me because my opponents would infuriate me, and I would just like hold in my anger, and I would just like try to push through because it's all a mental sport. Tennis is like in your mind.
Yeah. So would you identify now as a patient person because of that?
I have a lot more patience into that game.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. How about somebody on this half of the room? Yeah. Remind me your name again?
Mika.
Mika.
So when I was younger, every Christmas we would all gather and play like games and stuff just to get like the festivities going. And we used to have this game. It was called the blanket game. So basically, you would 2 people would be holding the blanket. It's like spreading it across, and then the other people are supposed to sit behind it. By the time the blanket goes down, you gotta guess who the person is. So it was kind of like harder for me because like I'm the youngest, and then in a Filipino family, we usually say like kuya or ate before their actual name, and I always like lost because it was like so hard. But it made me think that I had to be quick on my feet in a way.
Mm. And so do you identify now as someone who's quick on your feet?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And what was the name of that? What was the name of that game again?
We just called it the blanket game.
The blanket game. Hey, yeah. Call it what it is. Dark room, the blanket game. How about someone over here towards the front? Yeah.
I remember like every recess elementary school, 1st to 5th grade, playing football or like just flag football like with my friends. So then like going from middle school to high school, playing like all the way through varsity, and a few years out like junior college, just to like follow your passion, like whatever it is that you like to do, just to continue to like, find a way to make it like, a time for it to continue to play. So yeah.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Do you still play?
Yeah, I still try to like, at least not like on a weekly basis, but like yearly or like bi-yearly, we like have a tournament and like all get together and just have like a flag football tournament still. So
Beautiful. So
yeah.
Something that you used to do, it's not like you just left it behind. You find ways to incorporate it and use that as influence in your life?
Yeah, definitely.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you all actually for sharing your stories. If we had more time, I would actually want to hear every single one of your stories and your games. But we don't have time. So there's this quote. Let me start with the author. There's a guy, his name was Eduardo Galeano. He was from Uruguay, a Latin American author that wrote all sorts of like really beautiful, both nonfiction and fiction stories about mostly centering Latin America. And Eduardo Galeano, besides being a historian and an author, he was also literally one of the biggest soccer fans in the world. And my background is soccer, so that's like my lens. And he has this quote that I feel is so applicable to life, which is, "Tell me how you play, and I'll tell you who you are." Tell me how you play, and I'll tell you who you are. What does that mean to you? What does this quote mean to you? What's your name again?
Marcus?
Marcus.
I guess it kind of pertains to another quote that's like, what is it? It has to pertain to the same thing, kind of like who you are, where if you see the 5 people you surround yourself the most with, that's how you're a summary of those 5 people that you surround yourself the most with. And it's kind of the same thing where it's like, especially in chess, because my dad and I used to play chess a lot. He would say that like in chess, you could always tell if someone's an aggressive player or a passive player by what moves they do throughout the game, or like right off the bat. So it's kind of like you can tell if someone's a little more aggressive by acting first, a little more passive by waiting to see what progresses and then going at it.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Thank you. Anybody else have their thoughts on what this means to them? So Marcus you're absolutely right. In many ways, the way we play just as like who we surround ourselves with. They're reflections of little bits of us. Everything we do, we can't help but like bring a little piece of us into it. So yes, there is kind of like very real behavior. Maybe you're a little bit more aggro. Maybe you actually don't like body contact and you're more passive. There's also other layers to it too, which is like how you play. Do you play barefoot on the beach? If someone tells me that they play a lot of soccer barefoot on the beach, I'm probably not going to jump to think they're American. Probably not, right? If they tell me that they play on only the state-of-the-art AstroTurf soccer fields with the little rubber pellets, I'm probably going to think that they're in some American suburb. So even just the things that surround how we play are examples of a little bit about kind of maybe about our culture, maybe about our country, maybe about the neighborhood we live in. What kind of park is in our neighborhood? So this is something, and it comes from a book that's called Fútbol al Sol y Sombra, which if you read Spanish, I highly recommend you read it. And if you read it in English, there's the English version, which is Soccer in the Sun and Shadows. It's a beautiful book. Every chapter is an element of the game. The referee, the red card, the goalie, the linesman. It's this really beautiful kind of poetic book about the different behaviors. So there's something in thinking about this, tell me how you play and I'll tell you who you are, is a question that I've been thinking about, or just kind of a statement I think about a lot. And in 2017, I had the honor of hosting curating a group art exhibit called Game Recognize Game. And it was in San Francisco at Soma Arts Gallery in South of Market. And I, along with 8 other local artists, mostly kind of immigrant kids or children of immigrants that grew up in Oakland, grew up in the Bay Area, who are incredible artists now, we completely transformed a gallery into a space for play, which is a little bit unheard of, because typically you go to a gallery and what do? You just stare at some stuff, and it's beautiful, it's cool, right? You download that information, but like, what happens to our bodies, right? So there was one element, there was one little back room, which was the non-play room. It was a dark room with a video. And my cousin, who's a film director, Ivani Turiaga and I, we created a 6-minute mini film called Tell Me How You Play and I'll Tell You Who You Are. So without giving it too much further introduction, I'm going to invite you to watch this right now. I hope that these links all work. We're going to watch it. It's about 6 minutes. While you're watching it, I want you to download, pay attention to what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and just generally what connections you're making as you're watching this.
I can't eat that. And the kids around my block, they grew up with me, they can't eat it. And the kids that's gonna grow up after them, they can't eat publicity, they can't eat gold medals, as Tommy Smith said. All we ask for is equal chance to be a human being. And as far as I see now, we're 5 steps below the ladder. And every time we try and touch the ladder, they put their foot on our hands and don't want us to climb up.
No van a saber qué pasó con él. En un par de horas ya van a tener los sistemas y ya va a poder ir a verlo allí también. Dice que manejar usted?
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Shut the hell up! Shut the hell up!
Sit down. Sit down.
Let's go.
And act like you want to play this game.
No, you're not.
Let's go.
Get out of the car.
And then you.
I will light you up. Get out.
Wow.
Now.
Wow.
Get out of the car.
Failure to signal. You're doing all of this for.
Get over there. That's exactly what you want. Here we go.
Not bad, man. It's football. You go out there not intense, you're going to get hurt.
If they don't want their kids to be tough and rough and play the game, they need to put them in gymnastics or ballet dancing.
You play ball like a girl!
It's physical. It has nothing to do with culture, society, or the patriarchy. Men are naturally better at sports.
William Williams is a man. That is a boy.
Puesto fútbol es de hombre y queda todo dentro de la cancha, ¿no? Puesto fútbol para hombres. A ver si queda claro. Para hombre y para hombres.
It's basic frigging science.
Fast. No one can run that fast.
Don't touch me. Do not touch me. Put your hand behind your back. I can't breathe. 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 I can't breathe.
Hey, good shot, man. You gonna get the hit knocked out of you. So, do you want to get the hit out of you, knocked out of you without the ball or with the ball? 6'5", 230 pounds. He said he's ready to send Bears into hibernation. He's a beast! A beast! He's a beast! It's a beast! It's exactly what you want. Here we go. Let's go. Bring it out. Bring it out. Bring it out. Bring it out. Hit anything that moves. We're playmakers, man. We the best, nothing less on three. 1, 2, 3. We the best, nothing less. Oh, let's go dominate, man. Let's go have some fun out there. Hey, we need to step the up, man. Real talk. If they score, it's gonna be on us. Everybody do your job. Sets up, looks downfield, got a couple of targets in the end zone. Lightning. Breaks ball, gonna gut in the middle of it. Kidding me? Are you kidding me? Let's come back and battle for it, Bill. Gotta win. Gotta back step up for win. 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 Way to fight. Just remind these guys to get their hands up. Hands up. Told to get his hand out.
You told him to get his ID, sir, and his driver's license.
Don't shoot! Hands up! 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 Don't shoot! No justice! No peace!
The dream result would be equality, justice for everybody. This is really something about human rights. It's about the people. This isn't about anything other than that. And some people aren't given the same rights, aren't given the same opportunities, as others. And that's really what the issue is.
All right. Everyone take a breath. So tell me a little bit. What stuck out? What did you see, hear? What connections were being made? Yeah, what's your name?
Edeljohn.
Excuse me?
Edeljohn.
Edeljohn?
Like just all the different emotions, like put all together, like all the different stuff that's going on around the world too. It's like how they're connected, and like one thing is like going on in this world, but the other thing is going on in this world. Like just different emotions come to place, and then like the crying or like the laughter reminds me of childhood also. Like just like I don't know, a lot of stuff that I thought of too. Like that relates to me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Someone else, what are other connections? Yeah.
I think about power. Because like when you're young, like you're playing by yourself or you're playing with friends and you're basically free to do whatever you want. And as you're growing up and you start to have a power figure as a coach, and it kind of like makes you feel more competitive, seeking for power, seeking for superiority, and maybe that can come into your life in certain ways that can affect your future, how you see certain things and how you're gonna behave in society.
Absolutely. So power too, right? So Edeljohn talked about emotions. Your name again?
Diego.
Diego talked about power. What are, if you were to kind of categorize these into themes, what are some of the themes that this 6-minute film addresses?
I was response to that, yeah.
Can you say? Police brutality. Okay. What connection do you think we were trying to make between police brutality and sports?
There's like politics involved in sports too. They keep going back to like old political things, and there's prejudice and racism. Like when they showed the two pictures of the basketball player, like he was with like a white woman, and then they showed like the drawing from like a long time ago. The same thing, like, shows like a gorilla, so that's and then also another type of prejudice is like calling Serena Williams a man.
Calling Serena, yeah. Mm-hmm. Likening LeBron James to King Kong, one of the most intelligent, physically intellectual, most powerful men that we've gotten to watch play. They're likening him to a fictitious ape, right? And you pointed out again, your name again? Aisha? Yeah. Aisha points out calling Serena Williams a man, that to be powerful and to be the best top at your sport, that she is a man. That's the only way that we can wrap our heads around. And Aisha mentioned this idea that it's political. And just show of hands, who here believes that sports is political? Okay, who here believes that, like, it's not? Okay, so everyone's kind of come to their own place of understanding that, yeah, sports is political. We can't divorce it. So one of the things that we tried to do in this film was contextualize. Our society out there operates in a particular way that is deeply reflected and ingrained on the basketball court, on the football field, even on the playground, right? These things that have become normal, especially violence. And we know this, we see this, you probably study it, you probably read articles in this class about it, but it's so normal. And sports is a place that we do what? What do we do to get better at our sport? We practice, right? We practice. And we practice to the point where it pretty much becomes kind of like second nature, right? Sometimes when you're doing your thing that you do really well, whatever it is that you practice, so most of the time, once you become when you feel confident in it, you're not even really thinking about it, right? Sports is the same way. The things that we practice and start to normalize just become the way. So like concussions and CTE, it's normal. Like if you're going to play football, you're going to have brain damage. And there are many groups that have accepted that, right? Just accepted that that's a normal part of the game. So I want to ask you, the labor of play. What does labor mean to you? Labor. What does that mean to you? When you think of labor, hard work. Hard work. Okay. So when I say what is the labor of play, I'm asking two questions here. So first I want to ask you, whose job is it to play? Literally in the world, whose job is it to play?
Everyone?
Everyone? Okay. Yeah, everyone. I would love if we lived in a world where everybody's, yeah. But like right now, just kind of when we look around and you consider like, whose job is it really to play?
Professional athletes.
Professional athletes, and I heard something over here? Kids. Yeah, and there's a lot more in between, but you're absolutely right. When you think of whose job is it to play, it's, you know, the Marthas, the Serena Williams, the LeBron James, who get a paycheck for playing. But then on the other extreme, you have people who are not playing to get paid. You have the kids. Because play is, has been, and always will be one of our first jobs as a child is work. They are working out their socialization skills. They are working out their abilities to work with people, play, hold the ball, you know, not trip over the soccer ball, bounce a ball. This is work. This is labor, okay? And one of the questions, and this is where I start to get a little academic-y, but it's cool because it's given me the language. A lot of you, I'm talking about things that you already know. You've lived it. You've experienced it. I'm not giving you radically new information. But the cool thing about theory, the cool thing about having language is that you can name it. And once you can name it, you can share it. And once you can share it, name it, define it, you can question it, then maybe we can change it. And so when I think about this idea of labor, like the work, because it's taken me 36 years to confidently say that I play for a living. I'm not a pro athlete anymore, but play is one of my most important jobs that I do. Not only for pay, not just because I teach about it, but like just in my day-to-day life. Like tonight at 10 p.m. when my day is over, I'll be playing, and we'll get to that in a moment. But the work. So one element of the work is what we do, right? I learned to dribble the basketball. That's one way. But there's also work being done to us when we play. So play is doing something to us. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's totally weird. Sometimes it's painful. And it's like all these things at one time. Okay, so I'm going to stay here for a moment. I was a Division I soccer player at UC Berkeley. I grew up playing in all of the private leagues in Oakland. I was the one scholarship kid. I was the only Latina on most of my teams from kindergarten through senior year of high school. I got a scholarship to play at UC Berkeley. I was the only daughter of political refugees playing on my team. I oftentimes knew that there were parts of me that were a little different. Not all of me. Like I spoke the same soccer language. I didn't even have to speak your language and I could play with you. But there was something happening. There was this work, this happening at me by being in these spaces that weren't always comfortable. I didn't like them. And actually, I critiqued it so hard that for 2 years in my early 20s, after I finished playing my first pro season with Santos in Brazil, I came back to Oakland and wanted nothing to do with soccer. Nothing. And actually, Brazil was amazing. We'll talk about that another time. But I came back to the States, and I didn't want to play. And I realized I didn't want to play with the people I was playing with. It wasn't that I didn't want to play, and I didn't know how to stay identifying as a soccer player. I started working in open schools, and I didn't tell anybody. It was like my little secret that like I had this past life for the first 22 years of my life that I was a soccer player. And it was until I started working in Oakland, a group of students saw me playing and were like, excuse me, or there was a loose ball after school and I just started juggling it. And the senior girl was like, excuse me, what, you play? And she's like, we don't have a team. I want to play. I have all these teammates and we just really want to play. Like, will you just train us? And we didn't have a field. We didn't really have much. So after work, 2 days a week, I would train them on our asphalt. We called it the prison playground because it looked like a prison playground. And I would run the most like legit pro trainings ever. And first it was just senior girls. And then the freshman boys were like, that looks like so much fun. Can we do this? And we started a club, the Futbolistas for Life. And those students reminded me and tapped me back into my love for the game. And because of them, I was able to go back and join the pro team for the Bay Area that was called the Bay Area Breeze, which I think they're still around. I played 1 season with them. And it was after I had kind of left soccer for a while and then retrained and came back to this pro. And this was the question. And I started thinking about just the power of like, what questions are we asking? Like as an athlete, I was not really allowed to ask a lot of questions. It was like, coach says jump, you jump. Coach says sit, you sit. Coach says shut your mouth. And that was it. And I was like, well, where's the room? How do I move from a language of critique towards a language of possibility, all right? And this is huge, because one of the only ways to really get to this language of possibility is through inquiry, questions. You've got to ask questions. And I know people tell you that every question is a good question. I disagree. I don't think every question is a good question. I think that we got to be thoughtful about what kind of questions are we asking. And this is where education came into play. I went back to grad school, and I started reading my own. I got to kind of create my master's. I got to read the things that I wanted to read about. So I got a master's in the cultural studies of sports and education. And there was an academic named Gloria Anzaldúa, all right? And there's this concept. It's actually a Nahuatl word, an indigenous word from Mexico, that's Nepantla. And Nepantla, back in ancient times, was the Nahuatl word to describe this in-between. I said in-betweenness, this in-between state of being indigenous to this particular land while Spanish colonizers were coming and influencing and massacring and killing off and oppressing and imposing religious beliefs. And they were like, how do we maintain being us, but then there's this other thing happening? And Nepantla has become later adopted by Gloria Anzaldúa to describe this, what she calls this third space, okay? And in this in-betweenness, this space can be really uncomfortable and actually can be pretty painful. And every time I read theory, she does not talk about sports, let me tell you. Her focus is not sports. But every time I read theory, I'm such a sports head that I'm like, how does this relate to the field? How can I use this as a metaphor? What is this? And so she talks about how it's in this space, it's in Nepantla, where transformation is possible. It's uncomfortable, it's weird. And it involves a lot of turning inward to like look at yourself and understand. So for her, I'll use the example of like, okay, wait, what is this awkward space? So Gloria Anzaldúa was a brown, queer, Chicana, feminist, academic. Yo, all sorts of things that historically during her time were not, if you were an academic, you were seen as like a white man. If you're a Chicana, there's assumptions about you. If you're queer, there are probably assumptions that she was a sports player because she was queer. So she's navigating all these identities, right? And I could relate in the sense that, all right, I'm a first generation Latina from parents that were political refugees, overeducated in American institutions, sports-loving, critical thinking, social conscious. How does this fit in a soccer field where everyone around me was blonde-haired, blue eyes, white, middle upper class from Orange County? And so I didn't speak Spanish on the soccer field with them. So that part of my whole identity of the first 20 years of my life, to be on the soccer field, had to push it aside. Had to push aside certain family traumas. Just to be in this space comfortably, which actually wasn't super comfortable. And she says, don't turn your back on Nepantla when it gets uncomfortable. She's like, this is where the work happens. This is where you're like, all right, these are the different identities that I hold. And a lot of times they can be opposing. Our identities can be in conflict with one another because of what the rest of the world and society and colonialism. And so she says, this is the place where we can begin to decolonize. And this is our collective work. But it starts on the inside. It starts with one individual. So she talks about it requires inner work and public acts. And so I started questioning, what is my inner work? How do I reclaim being a soccer player if I don't want to identify as this kind of mainstream bubble that girl soccer players in the United States fit under this particular category? And it took me towards a new expression, which is freestyle soccer. And I hope that you're following along with me. I'm kind of trying to share a little bit of my personal journey, but also sprinkle in just how academia, reading, theory gave me language to be standing up here today to make these connections that I know we all live it, all right? We all have our own spaces of Nepantla that are made up of different opposing, conflicting things because of our culture, our language, our backgrounds. And so for me, I turned inward and was like, all right, what was gonna make me feel safe and comfortable as a soccer player? And also, sports can be totally amazing, right? But how do I highlight the things that I love about it? And it turned me to freestyle. That and an injury that doesn't allow me to boot up anymore turned me to freestyle. So with my best friend, Arjuna, he's a former breakdancer, we formed a group called Oakland Street Stylers. And we're a crew. This is not my paid work. This is what I'll be doing tonight at 10 p.m. And I'll show you just a little video so you get a little snippet. Hopefully it shows up. This is a little video we made. It's like an Adidas spec ad highlighting the town that we love.
Oakland.
Us there doing that's a little different than when you think about soccer? What was different?
You don't really see
see juggling like that in games.
Okay, you don't see juggling like that in games, that's for sure. Unless you're Ronaldo. Anything else? Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's any like competition in it.
Yeah, actually, there's not really too much competition, although we can get pretty competitive. And I do like competition. What else did you see that's different than traditional sports?
The environment, obviously.
Tell me more about that.
Like, you guys were all around, like, you know, Oakland and just like kind of, you know, at these different spots that like everyday people would be at maybe, so, yeah.
Absolutely. We very intentionally, what happens when we activate public space that wasn't intended for play? So what happens when I'm waiting for the BART in downtown Oakland? When we put on our music and we bring out a ball? What happens when we are on the streets of Broadway in Old Oakland with music and a soccer ball? Who might stop and play with us? The most unsuspecting characters. Because it's not a soccer field. We don't have all the crazy equipment. All you need is one ball. And we have, this is one of my favorite photos. This is a grandmother who had just picked up her 2 kids from after school, and she had never played soccer, was getting down with the soccer ball. Okay? All laughter, all joy. And then this third picture that's a little difficult to see here because of the lighting, you'll see Arjuna is doing a freeze pose on a rainy night underneath the MacArthur BART. It's one of the only lit spaces at night in our neighborhood. The parks are horribly lit. And if it's raining, there's nowhere to play. And so we go to the MacArthur BART station, which also happens to be home of like the biggest gentrification boom that's happened in Oakland in a really long time. Has pretty much already happened and is happening in North Oakland, my home territory. And so as construction of these 20 high-rise buildings that were just kind of, some were finished recently, some are being finished, where I'm about to have hundreds, if not like a couple thousand new neighbors, this is our way to claim space. We put our music, we bring our joy, we bring our movement, and for me, it's very political, let me tell you. As a person who identifies as a woman, as a brown woman, it's not common to see other women, let alone brown women, moving their body in a playful way at night on the streets for pure joy. I'm very aware that when I'm doing this, I'm doing something that most of the women that I see are not doing. Can they? Yes. Is it sometimes uncomfortable for me, who's a pro, expert, baller? I get shy and uncomfortable sometimes. Like, oh, don't look at me, oh, my leg, or oh, don't look at that part. And it's part of my inner work is that, no. If I, with all the tools and privileges and expertise that I have as a baller, if I feel uncomfortable, good Lord, I can't even imagine what somebody else with just a little bit less experience than me might feel doing this in public. And for that reason, I have to look inward and say, you know what? Yes, this is for my freedom, this is for my joy, and also, who knows who I might be influencing to move a little different, to enjoy myself a little bit different, to get down in the streets, right? To move away from our robotic, we go to this, and then we sit, and then we work, and then I go to class. Not cool, right? That makes life pretty mundane. So for me, this is my public act, looking inward constantly. And so one of the questions that I want to leave you with is, what is your inner work? And what are your public acts? And for all of us, it's not going to be through play. But when was the last time you played a thing? Anything? and to think about, yeah, how are we moving? And so I wanted to bring it back to your class, because in this class, I saw from your syllabus like what you will be reading, what you have read, the different assignments that you've done. And it is very like, it's setting up a historical context, right? Why is that so important? Because every single one of our bodies has been influenced and shaped by these historical things that happened well before we were even a thought. Who had access to play? What schools had sports programs? How sports even became ingrained in American society. All of it is deeply militarized, deeply political. And then we grow up and we're like kids in the Bay Area. Oh, my school had some sports, my school didn't have any sports. Oh, they cut PE, I only had to do 1 semester of PE. This was all by design, y'all. This was designed to be like this, and then whose bodies move less? Whose bodies play less? If you play less, you probably enjoy less. And so just to think about that and encourage you that if you don't play, just reflect on it. Think about what you might want to play. But even more deeply, besides the play, like what is your inner work? And how are we bringing that inner work out into the world? So I shared with you my expression is now freestyle, is my inner work, always kind of facing my demons, my insecurities of like, oh, did I really just move like that? Oh, that looks so stupid. But also putting myself out there and saying, yeah, what's up? This is my body, and it moves like this, and it's actually pretty fun. And like, if you can stand up, you can maybe do this too. And I've been really surprised to see just how many people are just waiting for someone to say, hey, move like this, right? They're like, oh, no, I can't. I'm like, no. And when you bring a soccer ball, it's almost less intimidating because they're like, it's not dancing. And you're like, it's totally dancing. You're totally just dancing right now, but there's a ball at your feet. So I want to leave you with this question for you to just kind of think about as the days, months, years. What is your inner work? What are you working through? And then how do we bring that and include and involve others with us? That is my presentation. I wanted to leave just a few minutes for any questions from you. Thank you for your attention and your participation. Yeah, I would really, really love to hear if you have any questions. I'm here. There's just about 5 minutes left in class, so leave it at that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Your soccer dance thing, how many people do you have in your crew? Just you guys?
We are officially a crew of 2. Open to all. We're always looking to expand our crew. Because we mostly do this at night in random places, we'll have people come like once or twice, but it's hard to, for people to make the time, I get it. But we do host community events, which make it more accessible. So we, a couple months ago, to kick off summer, during the during the World Cup, we hosted street soccer encuentro. Un encuentro is a gathering. And it was all sorts of non-traditional soccer games. So there's a game, we do freestyle, which you just need a tiny little space to cipher. We had mesa ball, which is kind of a plastic table, and it's like ping pong, except for you just use your head and you use your feet over this on this table. And we had a pana court, which is basically, imagine one of your tables times like this much bigger, and 2 people play inside, and there's little goals, 1 on each end. You get a point for scoring, but you get mad points for nutmegging, like putting the ball through your opponent's legs. And so it's kind of this, the really good players don't really even score on the goals, they're just trying to nutmeg you. And so we host these we hosted that at an outdoor beer, what are they called?
Like a beer garden?
Like a beer garden where it could be intergenerational. So we had 5-year-olds, 3-year-olds. My tia, who's 70, came. She's never played soccer in her life, and she got down with the freestyle. And so we do these encuentros to also bring folks that wouldn't typically play together to come play in a way that is inviting. Because if I took someone who's never played soccer and I'm like, jump into an 11v11 game, it's not fun. They don't know how to kick. It's just not fun. But freestyle is a point of entry where, you know, I've even freestyled with somebody in a wheelchair because so much of it is just about movement and like just slowly moving around each other. So yeah, so Oakland Street Stylers. You can follow us on Instagram if you want, and we post when we do more community events. Thanks for asking. Any other questions before our time is up? Yeah, Diego.
Have you guys looked for support from the city to try to, you know, create a program to include more people in the society to have something, you know?
That's a good question. So because this started as our passion project 4 or 5 years ago, we never thought about scaling it or making a business out of it. But we have started, because we get invited to do more things now. Like we'll go to events and we'll freestyle and we'll do kind of performance, or we'll do workshops. We've started to think about applying for small grants, just so that we don't have to pull out of pocket to pay the DJ, to buy the food. So yeah, we've been thinking about it, but I think there's a part of me that's almost trying to preserve it, because the second I make it my business and I gotta make money off it, I'm probably not gonna wanna go to the MacArthur Bard at 10 p.m. to play. So I'm treading lightly with that, trying to figure that out. Any last question? Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you, Rita. You were a fantastic group.
Yeah. Hey, folks. And so at 2 o'clock this afternoon, Dania will be in the theater. We're going to be showing the film for Ballistas for Life, and I think you're going to be involved in the Q&A right, June, afterwards. I think I probably forgot to announce it, but there will be some extra credit attached to that event. If you're around at 2, I realize some of you have class, work, etc. If you can come, great. If not, we will make sure we get you access to that film in the Q&A afterwards, so you can also get in on the extra credit if you can't make it today. Okay? But if you are around, you want to see these folks live and in person and see the doc in front of a whole bunch of other folks, 2 o'clock today at the University Theater. Okay?
And I purposefully did not talk about the film or anything really related to it, so it's not going to be redundant.
Yeah, even if it was, it'd be cool. Okay, thanks for coming.
All right, y'all. Have a good rest of your day.